Georgia on Donald Trump's mind, as we now know where Kamala Harris will be giving her closing argument. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
He said he meant lock him out politically, lock him out.
A little bit of cleanup at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue earlier today as the White House forced to explain what President Biden meant when he used the phrase, lock him up. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. Early voting totals continue to break records in key states. Wisconsin, for example, just topped its day one total. And in Georgia today, Donald Trump tried to draw a line between the records and Republicans.
Record numbers of votes are coming in, so that's supposed to be a good thing for us.
Now, Vice President Harris today stopping into one of Philadelphia's most famous delis ahead of a town hall tonight. And as Trump tries to criticize her for a lighter two-day stretch.
We have 13 days to go, and I am so deeply thankful to you. You are having an impact.
Our Kelly Meyer is covering the vice president this evening. But first, our Brooke Schaefer in Georgia tonight, where Trump is set to hold yet another rally this evening. Brooke?
Blake, the former president hitting on a number of topics here in Georgia today, from inflation, saying the damage has already been done, to the border, saying that he would shut down the border on the first hour of his first day in office. But he also talked about those record early voting numbers that we are seeing here in Georgia specifically. Already more than 2 million people have voted early in Georgia. But we're also seeing from some of this early data that it appears that more Republicans are voting early in those key battleground states, not only like Georgia, but also Nevada. We spoke to a handful of Trump supporters out here today, Blake, who told us that they actually voted early for the first time because Trump told them to. They said that they've listened to the former president sort of change his tune on early voting. He told the crowd here in Georgia today that he wants them to get out and vote early, saying that he wants to make sure his base votes early and make sure it's big, quote, too big to rig. Blake?
Our Brooke Schaefer live for us in Georgia tonight. As you see the live pictures there, as the former president will be speaking in Duluth. Coming up here on the Hill, by the way, Laura Trump, the co-chair of the Republican National Committee, joins us live. What the Trump campaign is seeing with early voting and why her father-in-law has flipped on that issue. That's coming up here on the Hill in about 25 minutes from now. All right, back-to-back days of a bit of an unusual home stretch schedule, you could say, after taping interviews in Washington yesterday. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, is in Pennsylvania tonight for a town hall. Just 13 days to go, yet a bit of a gap there for the VP. Our Kelly Meyer joins us live once again. Hello, Kelly.
Hey there.
You'd normally be out, of course, you'd normally be out on the trail. You're here with us. I'll take it.
Exactly.
But this is a little unusual, right? There were questions about why she off the trail for 2 days, but she made a bit of an impromptu stop today. I guess maybe to allay some of those concerns?
Yeah, and what she did today was, come out from her official residence here in Washington, D.C., and talk about that reporting that John Kelly and former President Donald Trump, really trying to say what she's been saying on the campaign trail. So very much a campaign-type speech, trying to make this case to her, to supporters, to voters, to remind them of who former President Trump they say is and the dangers of a second term. So what she did today, more of a campaign feel, even though it was at her official residence and she was here in Washington, D.C. So making that rare appearance, very last minute, and then now back on the campaign trail tonight in Philadelphia.
Quick stop, too, in PA today.
Yeah, adding that on, too, because she really has been just doing media interviews these past 2 days, which raised some questions of, what's she doing now with 2 weeks to go.
All right. Kelly Meyer, covering the VP. Kelly, thank you so much. Now, the Vice President will give her closing message from the Ellipse here in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, exactly 1 week before Election Day. That is also the site where former President Trump spoke on January 6th, 2020. The campaign says Harris's closing argument speech will offer a contrast between herself and the former president. A source familiar with the speech telling NewsNation it will focus on three things: her biography, the vice president turning the page and moving forward with her own policies, and highlighting the dangers of potentially re-electing Donald Trump as she sees it. Joining us now here on the Hill is Ben Wickler. He is the chairman of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Hello, Ben. Or I got a note here as the Atlantic asked heading into the election. This was a story the Atlantic wrote. Is Ben Wickler the most important Democrat in America? Former President Obama speechwriter John Favreau saying, if we could have 50 Ben Wicklers in all 50 states, the Democratic Party would be in better shape. Thank you for joining us tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. I will say that every Democrat in Wisconsin is the most important Democrat in America because we could tip the whole country. And you might say the same in Pennsylvania and Michigan at this moment.
There you go. Let me start in your state, though, of Wisconsin. DDHQ polling has it as our average has it as a 52% chance that Trump wins, 48% Harris, the polling average, 0.2%. But let's look historically here. Democrats have won 8 out of the last 9 presidential elections in your state. As you know, President Bush was able to make it competitive. Donald Trump was able to take it over the hump for Republicans. As you see it, why is Donald Trump playing in your state?
Well, this is the 50-50 state. In Wisconsin, 4 of the last 6 presidential races has come down to less than 1 percentage point. It was the nation's closest state in 2004, second closest after Florida in 2000, less than 10,000 votes in the margin of victory. In 2016, Trump won by 0.7 of a point. 2020, Biden won by 0.6 of a point. So it is normal for us to have an election that comes down to 2 or 3 votes per precinct across the state. That's what the polls say it is right now. And there's just a lot of Republicans.
You think it's 2 or 3 votes per precinct?
I think that is most likely where it is. And that's what every model and every poll is telling us.
Let me ask you about the vice president's strategy. She was in your state the other day, as you know, did an event with Liz Cheney. Politico's main reporter reported on that, and here's what Jonathan Martin wrote. He said, quote, Harris said nothing specific about how she'd govern, mentioned no looming issue on which she'd work with Republicans, and offered no reassurances about leading the country from the political center. As he wrote, it was all about yesterday and Trump, not tomorrow and her. A recent poll, Ben, shows that 57% believe that she has not done enough explaining what her policies will be. Is this a mistake in strategy for the vice president?
Well, she's making a lot of visits in Wisconsin, and over, she lays out her plans to bring down costs by negotiating drug costs, by building more homes to make houses more affordable and helping folks with first-time home expenses, with making sure that Medicare covers the cost of folks who are getting care at home, with a child tax credit to help parents be able to afford those expensive early years for a family, and signing Roe versus Wade into law. All those things are crystal clear, and she has been saying them in Wisconsin over and over. There's also a message.
So how do you square that
people who
polling?
might disagree with all those things, which is that we should be a constitutional democracy, not a dictatorship, not a place where the Constitution is terminated. And an event with Liz Cheney, you don't argue with her about the marginal tax rate on billionaires. Trump wants it lower. Harris thinks they should pay their fair share. You don't argue for a middle-class tax cut instead of a Trump sales tax with the tariffs. What you do is you say, look, we disagree about a lot of things, but we both agree on the Constitution, what our flag stands for, what men and women have fought for and died for in uniform around the world. And that is the idea of America. And that is what Trump threatens at this moment. So I think both of those.
So how do you square that polling, though, Ben?
And I think she's doing both.
How do you square that polling, Ben?
I think a lot of that polling comes from folks who listen to right-wing talk radio, watch Fox News, and never hear about Kamala Harris's actual policies. When you go through those policies with people, then it moves them. There's been a lot of research to make sure that this is the case. That when people hear what she actually plans to do, they become more likely to support her. Now, I also can't say that a lot of people know what Trump plans to do, even though, to me, I've print out a Project 2025 right next to me, and I've watched his speeches. I know his big plan. He's keeps telling billionaires he'll give them giant tax cuts. I know what he plans to do, but a lot of voters don't know what either candidate plans to do. That's why campaigns are so important in the final weeks, especially because folks who've been avoiding politics tune in now. And the more you tune in, the more likely you are to support Harris in the final stretch.
Let me leave you with this. You said recently that you lose sleep at night because you worry that the polls aren't capturing potential Trump voters, that the models aren't potentially capturing Trump voters. If that's the case, is it advantage Donald Trump?
I wouldn't trade places with the Trump campaign.
Okay.
Trump has had more voters than he's had in his polls in both 2016 and 2020. So I'd be remiss if I weren't concerned about that possibility. That's why on our side, we're trying to overshoot the mark as well. We're talking to a wider array of voters than we've spoken to at this phase in the campaign in a very long time. And that's because there are Republicans who know in their heart that Trump is a threat to the very idea of this country. Even if they disagree with Democrats about so many other things, they know that he tried to overturn an election in 2020, and his own closest staff are saying that he would like to be a dictator. So a lot of those voters, at the final minute, they could decide to vote for Harris this time and stop Trump from getting back into power. There are also people who might not vote at all. And for them, the question of whether the government should make their most personal decisions for them, that is the thing that could lead them to vote. And we want to make sure that both kinds of undecided voters in this final stretch are hearing from the campaign, hearing from local volunteers, and are making the decision to cast their ballot for Harris in Walls in Wisconsin.
Ben Wickler, got to leave it there. Appreciate it, sir. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill.
Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
You got it. All right, joining me now, Shaniqua McClendon is the Vice President of Politics at Crooked Media. Ashley Davis is a Republican strategist. All right, let's start there. I quoted John Favreau, who is one of your colleagues, who says we need 50 more of those, 50 more of Ben's. Your boss, okay, 50 more of Ben's all across the country. I just heard a little bit of blaming polling and Donald Trump as a fascist. Is that the closing argument?
That is not all that the vice president has been talking about. She is going to Texas, and I don't think she's going to win Texas, but she's going down there to remind people that abortion's on the ballot. Texas is ground zero for where women have really been experiencing the worst parts of these abortion bans. And if that can help Colin Allred get to the Senate, that's going to happen. She's talked about her economic policy. She wants to address housing. That is something that a lot of, people in the country generally, but especially young people really care about. She's talked about the care economy.
But people want more. They say they want more.
I'm saying all of this.
I think you're saying it, but the American public is saying they want more.
But I think Ben's right. It's people who are not getting access to her message. And, voters are not always going to go seek that out. So
you were, I'll let you respond to him, and then I got something for you on Trump. What did you hear out of him as a Republican?
Well, I didn't necessarily agree with him of blaming the polling, and I understand your point that people aren't getting the right messages, but I feel like that's up to the responsibility of campaigns to make sure that they are getting the right message. But she has so many surrogates that are speaking anti-Trump, whether it's Obama.
It's the strategy now,
correct,
right? To go after Donald Trump.
But if she...
Kind of like what Hillary Clinton with character in 2016.
But if she really isn't resonating with some of these voters, it really should be her out on the campaign. And actually, it was said a little bit earlier, like going after him, people know his faults at this point.
So the thing that keeps him up at night is essentially low propensity voters, which is people who don't normally vote, but maybe they will. It is the Trump strategy, a big part of it. It's big reward, it's big risk.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And it's also a big risk that he is actually going to get, first of all, are people really going to vote for him and get off their couch and vote that day or before? But also, that happened in 2016 that those voters weren't captured. I'm not sure if they're not captured right now in the polling. I don't think we know yet. Stirewalt would probably know better than we would. Maybe. But, in 2020, everyone thought he was going to win. And actually, the votes were counted.
Real quick, what if they're right? What if the Trump folks what keeps him up at night? What if it ends up being right?
2016 happened. Anything could be right. But in 2020, the Dobbs decision had not happened. And so I think that is something we also have to account for.
All right.
One thing that's interesting, I just want to get this in. For his closing, what he's doing right now is Nikki's doing all the robocalls. Haley's doing all the robocalls.
Is she coming out soon?
She's coming out soon.
She is coming out soon.
They're exchanging dates.
Exchanging dates. Interesting. Okay.
But my point is that's to get after some of these people that maybe...
Yeah, but he also has said nasty things about her recently. That doesn't help his case.
It'll be interesting to see when she comes out, if they're exchanging dates. Ashley, Shaniqua, let's catch you here in a bit. All right, early voting, by the way, already underway. And in swing states like Georgia, they are already seeing record turnout. We go live. Laura Trump, co-chair of the Republican National Committee, here on the Hill in moments, plus Brian Entin, back with a hint. Where in America is Brian Entin today?
We're driving across the country, Blake. I'll give you a couple of hints. I think this one's too easy, too. The place we are has the most freshwater coastline, the only floating post office, and where I'm standing right now, I think is a place that is very dear to your heart, Blake.
Brian Enton live from the home of the defending national champions. Brian on the other side of the break when The Hill returns.
You want to know the truth? It'll be like Detroit. Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president.
And you know what I think? He ought to keep Detroit out of his mouth.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. I'm Blake Berman. That Donald Trump earlier this month describing what the country would end up like if Vice President Harris is elected president. And the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer, you heard there, hitting back at Trump's comments last night. Now, Michigan is one of the 7 key swing states. It has been at the forefront of this election. Harris and Trump have visited Detroit and throughout the state of Michigan many, many times. Harris recently there Monday, and just last night, President Obama held a rally in Detroit. Detroit and the state of Michigan has a large constituency of auto workers, as you might know. For example, the United Auto Workers headquarters is in Michigan. All right, let's take a look at the state of Michigan and sort of what's happened there recently. So 2020 presidential election, President Biden, the Democratic nominee, won by basically 3 percentage points there, and let's call it 150,000 votes or so. But let me give you a historical sort of representation of what happened. So in 2016, look at that. Hillary Clinton got 47% of the vote in Michigan. Joe Biden beat that by more than 3 points. Conversely, Donald Trump basically stayed the same, flat there at the high 47% range. One of the questions, what about this? That third-party candidate vote and the uncommitted vote, what happens this go around? So let me take you real quick to Washtenaw County. And that's a big county there. University of Michigan is there. Very Democratic county, as you can see. Joe Biden picked up 72% of the vote there again, did substantially better than Hillary Clinton in 2016. Why am I talking about Washtenaw County? Here's why. All right, Brian Enton's road trip across America continues in our Driving the Vote series. Tonight, he has taken us to the great city of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and joins us live. I hope you're loving it up there, Brian.
Oh, it's so nice. The downtown is so quaint and nice. We actually literally just pulled in before this live shot. We've been on the highway all day. We were in Dearborn, Michigan. We were talking to auto workers at the Ford plant. We're actually driving the country in a Ford, which is a good thing because they take that seriously, I learned, when you're there. They don't like when you're in a different kind of car. So we were in the Ford. We were talking to the auto workers. It was interesting. Many of them, Blake, were still undecided.
On behalf of 1 million active and retired members of the UAW, I am honored to support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to be our next president and vice president. In the words of the great American poet, Nellie, it's getting hot in here.
The United Auto Workers Union is a powerful voice for presidential elections. Michigan is an important battleground, and the auto workers are right in the middle of the divide. The UAW endorsed Kamala Harris, calling Trump a threat to organized labor and the working class.
As you see with our members here, we know where our members stand, a huge majority.
We're here to tell you thank you for all that you do.
Thanks for being out here. When we showed up unannounced at the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, the union was passing out flyers at shift change.
Support Harris. She's the candidate that supports you.
As members who built the Ford Bronco and Ranger got off work.
Have you decided who you're going to vote for yet?
No, I'm still kind of weighing it back and forth.
Which way are you leaning right now?
I'm undecided.
Undecided?
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually talk to the workers, you realize pretty quickly they don't all necessarily agree with the UAW.
Do you think Trump or Harris would make it better?
I don't know too much about Harris. She's speaking good, but Trump was president before. He did what he said. When Trump was in the office, it was totally different from now, because now it seems like we're struggling.
The union vote could make or break this race, especially in close races in key states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where workers represented by unions make up more than 14% of the workforce. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won 51% of union households nationwide, according to exit polls. Trump won 42%. Trump went on to win Michigan and Pennsylvania. In 2020, Joe Biden won 56% of union households. Trump won 40%, and it was Biden who won Michigan and Pennsylvania. Both times, the Democratic candidate was endorsed by the UAW. At a bar down the street, I met Misty Robinette, who's worked for Ford and been in the union for 25 years.
Making us go toward, not making us, but, they're doing it, so we're in the union, so we need to follow suit. That's how I have always been, and I pretty much agreed with them.
But not anymore.
Not since Joe Biden, no.
Misty was a lifelong Democrat, but says she changed because of the economy and inflation. Misty even went to a Trump rally and met the former president.
What has she done for us the last 3.7 years? Nothing. And now all of a sudden she's going to go in there and she's going to get lower groceries. You're part of the reason why our groceries are like that. Can't afford, your bills are, your money you make for the week or for the bills for that week. You don't have extra. Come on.
But some auto workers who support Harris believe she is the labor-friendly candidate. At this Elks Lodge, I met Daniel Tucker and Jaron Garza, lifelong Chrysler and GM workers.
Who are you supporting for president?
Harris.
Kamala. Harris, yeah.
Kamala.
Yeah.
My biggest thing was always that when we went on, when the auto companies filed bankruptcy back in 2008, all the Republicans said, let them sink if they have. If that had happened, who knows what I'd be doing now.
It did surprise me, Blake, though, how many people told us they haven't made their mind up. Even people who didn't want to go on camera said they're still undecided. So we're going to keep driving. We're going to get back on the highway. But first, we're going to get sandwiches from this place. I don't know if you've been, Blake. Everyone says it's so good. Zingerman's here in downtown Ann Arbor. Blake?
It's the spot to go. Say hi to the good folks there. Brian Enton live for us tonight in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Thank you, sir. Don't miss Brian's next stop on the road trip, Driving the Vote. His series continues tomorrow right here on the Hill, 6 o'clock Eastern. Still much more ahead here on the Hill. On the other side of the break, Laura Trump joins us live. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Live look at Duluth, Georgia, where the Georgia for Trump rally is getting underway. The former president set to take the stage, give remarks about 30 minutes from now. Early voting data shows that Republicans are outpacing Democrats in some of the battleground states with less than 2 weeks until Election Day. New polling also shows that Trump holds a lead over Kamala Harris in Georgia. Across the country, voting is well underway with more than 18 million ballots already cast, either in person or by mail. That's more than 10% of the overall total vote from 4 years ago. At this time around, many states have seen record numbers. Joining us now here on the Hill is Laura Trump, co-chair of the Republican National Committee. First appearance, I believe, here on the Hill. So we thank you for the time down here in the home stretch. Thanks for being with us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you're from North Carolina. Let's start there in your home state. I've spoken in the recent days to Corey Lewandowski, senior advisor to the campaign, Chuck Edwards, he's the Republican congressman from Asheville, about any impacts that the storm could be having on North Carolina and if the campaign and if the RNC is comfortable with what they see. Have you seen anything that gives you worry?
No, I have to tell you, I feel really great about the way the election is going so far in these western counties. You know, we sent from the RNC and campaign a 10-point bulletin about 2 weeks ago to Governor Roy Cooper and the North Carolina General Assembly. They reviewed these 10-point bulletins, and these are ideas like making sure that people who maybe are displaced from their home county can vote in other counties, can return absentee ballots, maybe erecting new structures. They took into consideration all these points and they implemented them. And I think what you're seeing is that the turnout is sky high in those western counties. And it's really impressive considering all those people have been through. So we feel very good right now about where things stand. And we're very appreciative that the state worked well with us.
All right, let's move on over to Georgia, where the former president is tonight. Election integrity, quote unquote, is a big thing for yourself and for the RNC. The Secretary of State down there, Brad Raffensperger, today said this about the issue of non-citizen voting. He said that they had the best technology over the last 2 years look into it and barely found anything. I want you to listen to Raffensperger. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
It's easy to vote. We have photo ID for all forms of voting. I did a citizenship verification of our voter rolls nearly 2 years ago to verify that only American citizens were voting in our elections. The voters trust the process we have in Georgia. It's easy to vote. It's hard to cheat.
All right, that was Raffensperger from The Hill Sunday, but today he said they only found 20 instances of non-citizen voters, non-citizens on the voting rolls out of 8 million voters in Georgia. Why are you pursuing this if the numbers are so small in that state?
Oh, I think we're pursuing it across the country because, look, you come out of 2020.
But why?
Well, because you need to make sure that Americans, no matter if they're casting a vote for Republicans, Democrats, or third-party candidates in this country, feel like their vote matters and their vote counts. And I think you have a lot of folks who, after 2020, had a lot of questions who really didn't get answers to those questions. And so we've taken it upon ourselves at the RNC. And by the way, we've reached across the aisle to our friends at the DNC and said, would you come join us in this pursuit of election integrity? We hope to reestablish trust in our electoral process in 2024. And in years to come, because it was lost for a lot of people, unfortunately, in 2020. And we only should want American citizens voting in American elections. That's our law, and that's what we should follow. And I feel very good to hear that that you heard right there that there's only 20 instances, 20 too many for me. But nonetheless, you look around the country and other states. Though? Absolutely. You look around at other states in this country, and I think that there have been a lot of massive questions about who's on those voter rolls, whether they're legal citizens or not. We had to get the Supreme Court involved in a case in Arizona where they were registering people without verifying they were United States citizens. So listen, all we want is a free, fair, and transparent election. And we want every American, when they cast a vote this election and in future, to feel good about their vote.
Let me ask you about early voting, because right now in the 25 states that we have data on, it's 43% Democrat, 35% Republican. That's actually an improvement for Republicans compared to 2020. Former President Trump had one position on early voting, and now he has another. Let me play some sound real quick and ask you about it on the other side.
You got to get out and vote, and you can start right away. You know that, right? Now we have this stupid stuff where you can vote 45 days early. I wonder what the hell happens during that 45. Let's move see these votes? We've got about 1 million votes in there. Let's move them. We're fixing the air conditioner in the room, right? No, it's terrible. What happened the last time was disgraceful, including right here.
Now he's in favor of election voting, and if he hadn't given that message earlier, essentially, Laura, are you playing catch up with him changing his tone from it's not the best thing to now go out and do it?
Well, look, I think traditionally Republicans tend to want to go vote on Election Day. I think that's prior to Donald Trump, ever being involved in politics. But I certainly think it's been really great to see that he is completely on board with not only early voting, but mail-in voting, and understands how important this is to making sure that he wins on election night. Because the reality is, if everybody waits until Election Day to go vote, anybody out there with kids knows you got kids. Maybe your job won't let you take enough time off. Those lines could be very long. You could have weather issues, whatever it is, life happens. And our message from the RNC and the Trump campaign and from Donald Trump has been get out and vote early and don't go vote alone. We need to swamp the vote and make sure that everybody gets out and gets their vote banked. You don't want to be worrying about it and waiting in those lines forever. So I'm really happy to see this change. And our voters obviously have responded, as you just noted, with the numbers there.
Laura, real quick, your sister-in-law and brother-in-law were in the last administration of Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner. You've obviously jumped into politics. If Donald Trump wins, do you want to go to the White House and be involved in the administration?
I get this question a lot, as you might imagine. I can tell you, I don't even know what I'm doing for Thanksgiving, let alone what my life will look like. I get that, but I don't hear a no there. I don't hear a no there. Yeah. I'm so focused on November 5th and honestly haven't even thought about it. But I can tell you I'm honored to play this role as co-chair of the RNC, and we're looking forward to a great win on election night.
Laura Trump, co-chair of the RNC, thanks for being with us here on The Hill. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, you got it. Meantime, last night, the New York Times published an explosive new interview with John Kelly. He, of course, is former President Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, one of 4. In the interview, Kelly says, quote, Trump certainly prefers the dictator approach to government, and, quote, Trump certainly falls into the general definition of fascist. Kelly also quotes Trump as saying, Hitler did some good things too, end quote. Joining us now is the former chief of staff in the Trump administration, NewsNation contributor Mick Mulvaney. Mick, here's why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
There's 4 chiefs of staff in Donald Trump's administration.
Yep.
One's under criminal investigation. He ain't talking. Another one's a contributor at another network. Another one
just talked to the New York Times.
Just talked to the New York Times, and
I'm
you're a
happy
contributor
to talk
with us.
You, Blake.
So you have this story in The Atlantic yesterday afternoon. Trump praising Hitler. New York Times. Kelly thinks Trump meets definition of fascist. Kamala Harris then comes out today from the official residence, gives a statement in which she quotes John Kelly, and over at the White House press briefing, the White House says, yes, we agree that Trump is a fascist. Is that coordinated? Is this a closing effort, closing statement?
Trump people are going to say it's absolutely coordinated. All of those outlets will say it's not. Here's what I say to people. If it were coordinated, this is exactly what it would look like. I mean, it's sort of hard to get away from it. It looks like it has been set up to run like this. My guess is this is the closing argument for the Democrat Party, which I'm fine with because I think it's a losing argument. I think Kamala Harris's biggest problem right now is that people don't know who she is. She's going to run on she's not Trump. I think that's a losing argument. I hope she sticks with it.
When you read the John Kelly quotes, again, you are one of 4 chiefs of staff. You are critical of Donald Trump when you want to be and when you think you need to be, and you are supportive of him in other areas. When you read that from John Kelly, you thought what?
It was crushing to me as a former chief of staff. It's just so wrong. I mean, look, if you think that one guy can go into the office and be a dictator because he wants to, as was John Kelly saying, then you don't understand our Constitution. You don't understand the separation of powers. If you think that Donald Trump is the only president who's ever chafed under the limitations of presidential power, then you don't know our history. Go look at LBJ, for example. And if you think that your job as chief of staff is to go in and be the adult in the room to prevent the president from doing bad things, then you don't understand elections. More than 60 million people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. Not a single person voted for John Kelly. It's okay to criticize the president on policy. I've done it before. You want to criticize him on January 6th? I get that. But you don't do this. This is beyond the pale.
You're a fan of John Kelly, the person.
The man has done more for this
American
country.
hero.
40-year service. His son is buried at Arlington Cemetery, done more for this country than I will ever do. This is wrong to do as a former chief of staff.
Did you ever hear anything of the like?
Not a single word. In fact, I was texting with a bunch of my former coworkers today going, look, I'm going to go on TV tonight and said, I never heard anything about Hitler. Never heard the name. Does anybody remember anything differently? Dozens of them come back and say they never heard the name.
Dozens.
So I'm not sure where John Kelly's getting it.
So real quick, how do you get from what you said to that?
To what? John hates the president. He just does. And it's a shame that it's come to that. He should have quit the job long before he did. He didn't come to work the last several months. He actively hated the president. Imagine trying to be the president of the United States with a chief of staff that is actively undermining you. It's nearly impossible to do the job as is. It is impossible to do the job with that type of staff around you.
Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Thank you, sir. Hang around here. Still coming up here on the Hill on the other side of the break. The U.S. continues to face threats from Russia, China, North Korea. So is the next commander-in-chief, whoever it might be, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, are they a wartime president from the day that they step into the Oval Office? The full panel after the break.
NewsNation tomorrow. J.D. Vance, Chris Cuomo, one-on-one in the final days of this election nail-biter. Watch the special NewsNation Town Hall tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, only on NewsNation and streaming on X.
Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. The United States today confirming that North Korean troops are in Russia to fight in the war in Ukraine. The White House National Security spokesman John Kirby asked about it at the White House briefing room today.
If Russia is indeed forced to turn to North Korea for manpower, this would be a sign of weakness, not strength, on the part of the Kremlin. It would also demonstrate an unprecedented level of direct military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, with security implications in Europe as well as the Indo-Pacific.
It is just the latest escalation with threats emerging around the world from Russia to the Middle East. You see the map there. The next president of the United States, whoever it might be, will have to deal with some or all of that. The Atlantic Council, a nonpartisan D.C. organization focusing on U.S. leadership around the world, declaring, quote, the U.S. is electing a wartime president. Full panel now. Nick Mulvaney back. Shaniqua McClendon is the vice president of politics at Crooked Media. Ashley Davis, once again, Republican strategist. Joel Rubin, Democratic strategist. Hello to you all.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to have you all back. Ashley Davis, former Bush White House official. Probably a better way to put it, whatever she says. As a president, you don't often get to choose the issues that come before you. You get to choose some. Others come before you. Bush 9/11. You get to choose maybe Obama with Obamacare, right? Trump with the Trump tax cuts. But we told you about this the other day, Joel, that whoever is the next commander-in-chief, no matter who, if it's Trump or Harris, they are dealing with a lot, whether they want to deal with it or not.
Oh, absolutely, Blake. And look, you want to have somebody who's steady at the lever, who knows how to run national security, who our allies trust. And right now, what we're seeing with North Korea joining with Russia, that's a recipe for Donald Trump's leadership. That is an anti-American alliance. And Donald Trump has said nothing to counter Russia's meddling and Russia in our election, as well as its invasion of Ukraine. Now pulling in North Korea. What do you know about the leadership we're going to have?
What do you know about Kamala Harris?
What we have with Kamala Harris's foreign policy, first and foremost, is steady and strong. We have seen, because we're watching it in full bore, the United States has been behind Ukraine 120% since the invasion of Russia. And she was the first person to sound the alarm, and she did it effectively, and has helped to galvanize our allies. Look at our ally, Israel. We're backing them fully. They have been very effectively taken on Hezbollah. They have launched a very aggressive war that has cost her politically, but she's sticking by Israel. And this is the kind of steady leadership we want. We don't want someone we can't trust who aligns with our enemies.
You were in the White House for 9/11, employee number one to set up the DHS office in the White House. You look at that map, you see what?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't like to disagree a lot, but we can't say that the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration has not caused, I'm not saying they're the direct cause of all this problem, but if you're, what's happening in Taiwan, what's happening in Russia, and what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East, that all happened under their watch.
It happened, and you have somebody, the world we do not control. We respond to it. And what we're seeing is allies together. What you would see with Donald Trump is, hey, Vladimir, take Ukraine, and I'll just walk away from it. And our NATO allies, you're left in a dustbin.
Yeah, I don't believe that. But
he was president once already. Whether you like him or not.
He
didn't. Yes.
So who did Russia invade Crimea under? A Democrat president. Who did Russia invade under Donald Trump? Nobody. Who did Russia?
Well, they were in there all 4 years.
Yeah, but who did they invade anew? Nobody. As soon as Biden takes over, screws up the Afghanistan withdrawal, they invade.
What would you say though about the crackdown on Hong Kong? I mean that.
What about it?
Happened in the Trump administration.
Yeah, but that's a minor deal compared to what's happening with an invasion of a sovereign state. So keep in mind, Hong Kong was part of China. I mean, the lease ended, 20 years ago?
So, exactly. All right. Meantime, one of the most successful hedge fund managers of all time is sounding the alarm on the U.S. economy. Paul Tudor Jones, who became famous after predicting the 1987 market crash, a billionaire hedge fund investor, warning the U.S. budget deficit and increased spending promised by both presidential candidates might lead to a big sell-off, and neither, he says, Trump nor Harris, right now, is the right one for the job.
Between Trump and Harris, you've probably got the two people least suited for the job that's ahead of them.
He proposed some solutions, starting with allowing the Trump tax cuts to expire.
You have to let the tax cuts expire.
You have to.
You have to let those expire. That's $390 billion. We're going to have, again, we're gonna be broke really quickly unless we get serious about dealing with our spending issues.
Shaniqua, he says neither Trump nor Harris can meet the moment, and both of them are going to spend like crazy, and that problem's going nowhere nowhere fast.
We have two real choices. We have two real choices on November 5th. So I think he's got to get over neither one of them being the best person for the job unless he somehow is going to get someone else on the ballot in the next couple of weeks. But I also agree with him. We should get rid of those tax cuts. You know, that was something that Trump obviously campaigned on and put forth, but it did not help any middle-class people. And that's exactly who Vice President Harris is.
The former budget director would say
I'm actually not disagreeing with you. I'm disagreeing with Tudor Jones, and here's why. No one has any credibility on this, right? Folks who follow this for a long time, I feel like the guy standing on the street corner going, the end of the world is nigh. Sooner or later, I'll be right, but I've been beating the drum on this since 2011. Wall Street was one of the biggest backers of the Trump tax cuts. Now it's a problem. Wall Street's one of the biggest backers of, let's just keep the government open. Let's spend the money. We can't do a government shutdown. Now they're against spending. So my biggest fear is that Republicans are losing the moral high ground on this. And when the crap does hit the fan, no one is going to have any credibility with the voters. Right now, voters don't care, which is why it's not getting.
Voters don't care, but they will. I don't know what the world's going to look like in 2032. No one does. But when you start telling people in 2032, hey, that $100 Social Security check that you're getting is going to be $80 next year, then all of a sudden, I think that's like the biggest, could be one of the biggest campaign issues.
I'm going back to my little Nikki talking points. Remember, she tried to take on entitlement reform in regards to coming up with a solution for the campaign, and it was like, no one cares. No, Trump, it was actually
Trump
worse
offered
for her.
The biggest reduction. My budget in 2017 was the biggest reduction in mandatory spending in history. And who threw it in the trash faster? The Republicans in the Senate. So my fear, again, is that nobody has any credibility on this issue. As much as I admire Paul Tudor Jones, he doesn't have any credibility on this issue.
You probably loved writing that budget.
I loved it. I absolutely did. It was great. The last budget, by the way, the last budget, I think, was the one in 2019 that Russ Vought and I wrote. That was the last budget that will ever balance.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, Shaniqua, Ashley, Joel. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Another live look. Duluth, Georgia. Donald Trump set to hold a rally any moment now. The former Democratic presidential candidate will be in attendance, one of them at least. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance, joins us on the other side of the break. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Live look, battleground state of Georgia, where Donald Trump headlining a rally in that state. Georgia, Duluth is the town, about 25 miles northeast of Atlanta. Host of On Balance, Leland Vitter, joins me live. Leland, we're told an arena of about 13,000 looks fairly full there. Interesting sort of contrast here, the final 2 weeks of the campaign. Kamala Harris was off the trail for about a day and a half. Now we know that there's going to be a closing argument at the Ellipse National Mall area.
What the closing argument is going to be about. Yep. I think what's interesting when you look at this picture in Georgia is twofold. Number one, we know that a quarter of the people who are going to vote in this election in Georgia already have.
Yep.
So how much of this is preaching to the converted? All of it. How much of this and how good is the Trump campaign going to be at converting all of the people who are in that rally to voters? And that arc is something the Trump campaign has spent a lot of time trying to work on and trying to fix. Indications are it's getting better.
You've heard this. I have as well. They're focusing on low propensity voters, those voters that maybe haven't turned out in the past that could turn out in this election. You've got Geraldo Rivera coming up on your show tonight.
We got Geraldo coming up, talking about some of the